Just before moving on to the agenda, I think it would be useful if we each introduced ourselves. So I'll introduce myself and then ask each of you in turn to introduce yourselves. I'm David Forbes, Chairman of the JIAC. Douglas? Douglas, you muted?
First of the day, Douglas Matthew, a committee member.
Jim?
Jim Gallagher, also a committee member.
Tracy?
Tracy Latham-Green, committee member.
Ian?
Ian Holdenby, committee member.
I'll just go as it appears on my screen now. John?
John King, APCC, your minute taker.
Gillian?
Gillian Holder, Deputy Chief Finance Officer.
Mark?
Mark Lunn, Internal Audit Manager from Mazars.
Sharon?
Sharon Clark, Force Chief Finance Officer.
Aubrey?
Aubrey Williams, Research and Performance Officer for the Commissioner.
Helen?
Helen Henshaw, External Audit Engagement Lead.
Okay, Julie?
Julie Flint, Chief Finance Officer to the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Just for the record, Justin Harwin, Deputy Chief Constable, is likely to be a bit late from the meeting and he'll join when he can. So can I move on to the formal part of the meeting and any declarations of personal or prejudicial interest? Anyone got anything? Okay, thanks. Apologies? Not aware, other than Jason being late, I'm not aware of any.
No apologies, Chair. No.
Okay, thank you. The minutes of our previous meeting on the 26th of January, are these approved as an accurate, complete and accurate record of the meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Any issues arising will come under the action log. I'm going to defer the action log at the moment because there's one or two points in there that Jason may have an interest in. So I think what we'll do now, if everyone's in agreement, is move to parts of the agenda that don't directly impact on Jason and return to aforementioned items later on in the day. So I think the first item that we can consider would be item 11, which is the finance review update, which is to be an oral update from, well, Julie and or Sharon.
Julie, do you want me to start?
Yes, please, Sharon.
Yes, we have made some progress on formulating a plan post the finance review, which unfortunately we have placed on hold again. We're hoping to revitalise it in June. The reason being is that with the decision on the G4S contract and the resourcing that we need to put into that, one of our corporate finance team members is now full-time on that exit project. So we're short-staffed, and with it being year-end, etc., as you can imagine, we're struggling with the day-to-day. We have gone out to an agency and have a qualified accountant starting on the 1st of June. And one of the tasks that she will be assigned is starting to put together a more detailed plan for the finance review, and we hope to bring it back to you at the JIAC following that point when we've got some resource to devote to it.
Okay. Do you want to add anything to that, Julie?
Yes, thank you. I mean, it might just be worth mentioning that we have signed up to AFEP 2. I've forgotten what AFEP means, but it's Achieving Financial Excellence in Policing, I think that's what it means. So we've signed up to that.
Is that a SIPFA initiative?
It is. SIPFA are coordinating it, and with the subscription that we pay, we get various training courses and development opportunities and that sort of thing. So that side of the finance review and the development of the finance function is continuing, and it sort of fits in nicely with the end of the G4S contract and building an in-house finance function that is fit for fit for the future. So we've got a real opportunity here, and we're making sure we get the tools together in order to realise the benefits.
Okay.
David, could I ask a quick question,
Yes,
if I may?
yeah.
Is that a tailored sort of package as far as we're concerned? Because one of the challenges that we've had is that we seem to get the generic stuff, but doesn't really reflect the design, the nature and the constraints that we have as a force. And we get a nice generic answer, but not actually something that works really for us.
Do you mean the AFEP 2?
Yeah, the AFEP
achieving-
2.
Yeah.
Please.
I mean, it's they are tailored to some degree to the size of the force, but in generality, it's the same programme across the service. And of course, for us, one of our challenges has been that we have a corporate team and we have a G4S team as well. Well, over time, that's we're moving away from that, so we are going to end up being rather more typical, I think, than we have been in the past. So this is the real opportunity to use the resources of AFEP 2 and the impetus that the Future Services Programme is giving us to really create a fit for purpose finance function going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, queries on that item? Okay, so we move then to item 12, which is the latest version of the PCC's risk register. Aubrey, do you want to say anything by way of introduction?
I would just reiterate the key points really that are in the report, that it's been a fairly stable period. No new risks have been added.
Okay.
The only changes.
Yeah, Aubrey, you're breaking up a little bit, so not sure we can all quite hear.
The register since been some based on.
Any questions or queries? If we can manage to get them through, as it were.
Unfortunately, I didn't hear what he said.
Essentially said, but the report is as the report.
I have a question, David.
Yes,
I
please.
might have even managed to get my hand up, which was quite technical. Albeit, I'm just looking at the disposal of West Parade, and I see there's a sentence: outline concept for future use of building discussed. Further investigation and proposal underway, and that was November 2020. That's quite a while ago now. I wondered if we had any more detailed information on that, or a little bit of an update.
I think the update is fairly bland, just due to commercial sensitivity with regards to current negotiations. I think, I don't know whether Julie can provide any more detailed information on the current status of it.
Yes, I can. I mean, I think it's appropriate to discuss this. There, you may well have heard of, is it the Town Deal? A government initiative to invest in towns and cities around the country. And in Lincolnshire, I think we've had a number of offers, I think, from government for the Town Deal. One of them is on the coast, so Skegness and Mablethorpe and so on. I think there's also one for the Boston area and there's one for the Lincoln area. And we've got an interest in the Skegness one and the Lincoln one, because the Lincoln one potentially would result in some funding to invest in the West Parade building in partnership with others to really use the facility, for the good of the public in a sort of public service way. So that work on that is ongoing at the moment, but very much dependent on the progress of the Town Deal, which was announced, I think, as part of the budget that the national budget by the Chancellor in March.
Okay. Thank you for that. Could I just raise a couple of items on the paper? On the covering paper at paragraph 5, mentions made of changes to the composition of responsibilities of the Chief Officer team and a revised governance structure. We haven't had any information or detail on that. So I was just wondering if we can expect any information or detail on that.
I think it was that was one of the items that Jason was due to feedback to the committee on, because it also aligns with some of the assurance mapping work.
Indeed,
as well.
I was going to pick it up with Jason under the assurance map item when we get there, so perhaps I'll leave it till then.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. And the other one is risk 13. I'm hoping that can potentially be removed, because if we haven't adequately prepared for the PCC elections now, we're probably stuffed, to use a non-technical term.
Yeah, that'll certainly be one of the risks that'll be removed.
Okay. Potentially, the outcome of the election, I'm guessing, may bring its own risks that aren't yet on the register, depending on what actually happens in a week or so's time.
Indeed.
Okay. Any other questions, queries, comments on the PCC risk register? Okay. The next item I think we can safely move to is agenda item 14, which is the value for money and efficiency plan. Again, do Julie or Sharon want to say anything by way of introduction to this document?
Sharon, will you take this?
I'm happy to do so. So each year, the value for money and efficiency plan is part of the suite of plans that support the financial strategy and the budget. I don't think this one has come to the committee before now, so here it is. It sets out how we hope to achieve value for money in spending our budget and our capital programme over the next 12 months. As you will see, a lot of the focus, I won't go through in detail, but simply to highlight that a lot of the focus is around investment in IT, because that is the main area where there are potentials for working more efficiently and releasing savings, whether those are opportunity savings in terms of achieving more with the same amount of officers and staff, or cash savings as well. So that has been the principal area of focus in this strategy, and has been probably for the last 3 or 4 years. I won't go into any detail about the specifics which are in there, but I will take questions.
Okay. Ian, you have a question?
Please. I think it's more of a case of just a flag, Sharon, based on what you just said about the IT, the investment in the IT. I think in the private session, there's a number of questions that I want to tie up with the risk register, tying up to things like the command and control and IT investment, and just making sure that story's straight. Because obviously I recognise there are conflicts and balancing acts to take place, but just want to make sure it's consistent with what we're seeing in all the other areas, if that's all right. Yes,
and as you say, it probably best taken when we look at the Chief's risk register
exactly.
in the private session. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments from colleagues? Jim?
There's a welcome emphasis on using the modern technology, IT, to actually make the policing more efficient. One of the things which has come out, though, on the risk registers in particular, is that as we get these items of equipment or software, often have a relatively short time span, and then we seem to be into a predicament about are they going to be supported in the future and so on, and the cost of replacement. Do we factor that in when we're looking at these schemes? How long will the equipment, the video cameras or whatever, be functional for? Are they evaluated on that basis?
I was about to say our financial evaluation for projects of any size includes a discounted cash flow and payback period. So we can see if the savings that are realised actually pay for themselves within the life of the investment, in which case they are worthwhile doing. And in terms of the fact that they do have a shorter lifespan, one of the things that we are now getting far better at is building in a replacement strategy into the ongoing capital and revenue budgets.
Right. And contractual arrangements which would actually support that as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Julie, do you want to speak?
Yes, I was just going to underline what Sharon said about building in provision, for replacement. Just a bit of historical perspective, really, that a lot of these new facilities over the last, few years have been funded from one-off special grants from government innovation fund.
Julie, you've just cut off. Is it just me, or has she cut off?
No, she has cut off. Either. I can't wait to get back into the meeting room. It has to be said.
Are you there, Julie? Tended to go quite well up until now.
Yes, I think basically what Julie was pointing out was because a lot of these big projects, niche is a good example, where it was largely funded from Innovation Fund grant, that going forward, what we've had to make sure is that we make provision for replacement of the systems or parts of the systems, because obviously the upfront capital is unlikely to be repeated.
Is Sharon, just a quick question, if I may, David, just to follow up on that then. Whilst other grants may be coming available at various points in time, and to take Jim's point, I can take a hint. With Jim's question about the fact about the replacement and everything else, is that something that can be encapsulated in the grant claim for this now? Because like I say, it's very almost spot funding. If you go, right, we'll buy you that sort of thing and it's funded from this. Is that is there an element of trying to get a project that lasts 5 years? If the capital only lasts 3 years, then you kind of apply for stuff that lasts 5 years rather than just saying, I just want that camera. Is it relatively sophisticated, or is it just literally a blunt, here's my shopping list, thanks?
Well, it's more about demonstrating, here's a new service, here's the efficiencies that we can deliver with it, and then it qualified for the innovation funding. But in terms of the replacement cycle, that would not be tackled in that grant claim. It's simply that once you've got to the end of that life cycle, by that point, you would expect it to be embedded, realising the efficiencies, and therefore it's worth undertaking the replacements in your own capital programme. It becomes business as usual, and you treat it like a standard replacement.
Fine. Then you draw on it yourself to say, yeah, it's worth it, I'll continue.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, Julie, Sharon seamlessly picked up where you got cut off and carried on. Obviously,
we're a good team.
Great team working there. Yes, absolutely. So I think we've dealt with that question. Anyone got any other questions, queries on this plan? Okay, we're working our way through these items that we don't need Jason for. The next one would be the forward plan and action plan, agenda item 15. Do you want to say anything about that, Gillian?
Just to say that I've obviously updated it for the discussion on the date changes that we had at the last meeting, so that's all been included. And I've updated the action plan a little bit as well from the last meeting on what's progressed and completed, and added a bit more on the timeline and the status than there was last time.
Do you want to give my fellow members a bit of an update where we are in terms of the 2 vacancies we have coming up?
Yeah, so there was an advert drawn up, reviewed by HR, various senior managers in the PCC and the Chief Constable, and everyone was happy with it. I've just tweaked the person spec and the job description to more reflect the skills matrix that we've all input to. So that's going to be with HR today. So I'm hoping by the end of the week it'll be on the websites, and then we've just got to choose the various external media to try and get the best response for the advertisement, really. But yes, we're well on with it.
Okay, any other questions, queries? It's a bit, because the agenda's a bit upside down, but I'm guessing we may have to be fluid in terms of the dates of future meetings, depending on progress with account sign off and what have you. We may well have to tweak some of those dates we've just put in the diary, I presume, Gillian.
Might have to tweak them, or might just have to slot maybe an additional meeting in just to cover off one or two specific things if time is sort of getting away from us a bit, but we'll just see how it plays out.
Okay. Jim and then Mark, I think, had questions.
It was just going back to the recruitment. I think in the past we've had difficulty in actually finding the right vehicle to get it widely known. So I think that is, it might be worthwhile when you've got a proposed list of advertising vehicles to actually perhaps circulate that to the existing committee, and we could maybe identify some additional avenues that might be worth pursuing. It might, for example, be worth asking other police organisations in the East Midlands whether or not they found a particular recruitment method more successful than others, and make sure that we use that as well.
Yeah, thank you.
I think it was Mark next.
It was only a minor point. Obviously, on the forward plan, you've got the internal audit charter coming to the September meeting, but it's actually on the agenda today. So it's up to you whether you to bring it back or just update that today.
I think
minor point.
We'll take it off September then. Ian.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm kind of with Jim's point here about the recruitment. Whilst my other colleagues are highly irreplaceable, I'm a consumable. That's not a problem at all. But I would say I think we just need to be a little bit cuter in terms of how we use certain channels and the type of skills that you're looking for this time. Because again, it might be that depending on the type of people who are applying for, doing LinkedIn and promotional LinkedIn and resharing on LinkedIn and however we want to target them, the type of people that we're trying to attract, direct advertising may not be there, where a little bit more subliminal nudge and recommendation referral stuff might be more appropriate. So again, the sooner we can get that out and use the channels, I think the better. Let's be honest, you don't want another me, do you? Let's be honest. One's more than sufficient. You've done your national service. You put up with me for 8 years. You're good.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you. Okay. Don't think Jason has joined us yet. So I wonder whether, and I'll be guided by, for example, Julie, whether we could deal with the external audit update next. Is that okay, Julie? Yeah. So if that's all right with Helen, if you could pick up agenda item 10 with your oral update on the financial statements for 1819 and 1920.
I can share, yes, with pleasure. I'm afraid it may come across somewhat as Groundhog Day is my only reservation with doing the oral update, so I apologise in advance for that fact. So the committee will be aware that the 2018-19 and 19-20 audits remain open at the moment. I'm continuing to work with Julie, Sharon and Gillian to progress the matters that are outstanding in those 2 years. In terms of the 18-19 audit, obviously there's been some movement on the main matter outstanding, and that appears later on in your agenda with regard to the internal audit report that the committee will discuss. In terms of the 19-20 audit, the most recent audit, aside from a small number of matters to be worked through on the asset valuations, I think if memory serves me correctly, we were at the point last time this committee met where the valuation of the South Park building was only just been received. So that's been received, shared with ourselves at this point, and we've undertaken the procedures with respect to that. So things are moving forward. But again, the procurement audit report, which we're going to discuss later, is also a feature of the 1920 audit. I'm happy to take any questions that any of the committee might have.
Well, could I first go, really? Do you want to say anything about, I think it would be helpful if you said something about the 2021 audit, which my understanding is, from your perspective, can't really commence at the moment because of the legacy issues from the previous 2 years?
Yes, I mean, ideally, we're now into April 21, and I would have delivered to you an audit plan for our external audit of the 2021 financial year. I don't feel it's appropriate to do that at the moment, while we've still got a number of issues remaining to be closed out with regards to the 2 previous financial years, because obviously the resolution of those issues will factor into our risk assessment for the 2021 audit. So that the planning for that audit has been delayed for that reason, but also because I need to prioritise the use of my staff to close out those previous years. There's no point steamrolling ahead with later years when the earlier years are not yet done. That will have a knock-on effect in terms of the timeliness of the closing out of the audit for the 2021 financial year. I think that's inevitable. And that is, in this instance, specific to Lincolnshire Police, because obviously we've got some issues here that we're working through, but more broadly than that, the timeliness of audit opinions for 2021 across the entire sector will be not as good as the whole sector would like, whether you are a receiver of an audit report or, in my case, a giver of an audit report. And that is a feature of so many audit opinions for the 1920 financial reporting year being delayed. So if I sat here today and told you that I think we will get your audit opinion delivered by, for example, the end of September this year for 2021, I don't think I would be telling the truth, and so I don't want to give you that impression. There will be a longer tail on the 2021 audit, notwithstanding the fact we're already entering the Lincolnshire cycle well behind schedule.
Okay. Ian, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, David. Helen, I suppose my question and concern is when we look explicitly at the risk evaluations and almost doing the worst case scenario on this about what we're finding out in terms of signing off the 18, 19, 19, 20, is understanding that the maximum impact the concerns can have. Because again, I'm looking at some of the horror stories that we've had over the last few years in terms of getting the right personnel in at the right time to do the reviews. And there's obviously a finite amount of time. And by not almost going into that cycle, and no disrespect to your colleagues, you tend to have the people from an audit planning perspective, the good ones are picked first. And all the people who've done work on our area will be allocated somewhere else. And then we're left with the same situation we had 2 years ago, where we didn't have the right type of people at the right time on the audit. Now, notwithstanding that, the right time we will try and hopefully resolve, and I know we're trying to push from both sides, trying to get the 18, 19, 19, 20 signed off. My concern is about the pool of people we'll have from your side available to do the audit anyway. Sorry about my cat.
Okay, so to answer, I suppose to respond to your concern, Ian, which I think is around effectively the quality of audit staff assigned to Lincolnshire Police.
I'm not, yeah, I was going to say, I'm not casting aspersions, but I do know that we had, when we did the transition a couple of years back, it was quite painful getting the right people. And if they're being gobbled up on other projects, then we're left with people who may not have the appreciation for. We had a lot of generalists, let's be completely candid, we had a lot of generalists, we had people who weren't necessarily used to the force or public sector, and it was quite challenging from both sides trying to get the audit done in the right way. So it is that I'll take your paraphrase, but I just don't want, if they play this recording back, for me to say I'm slagging them off.
No, I'm not taking it as that at all. I just wanted to, it was quite a long
yeah,
speech.
no,
I just
sorry,
wanted to make sure I was
trying to be as polite as I can. I'm usually a lot quicker because I'm a lot more blunt, and I'm trying to be less polite.
Okay, no, that's fine. I think I take your point. I think a lot of the challenge that has been experienced in the past is the needing to come in and out. So you have some auditors start the work, unable to finish it for whatever reason. You know, you will appreciate the fact that they're not sitting around, you know, back in the office waiting to be able to pick up Lincolnshire Police again. That you know, there's lots of other work that we need to reassign them to, and so there was a number of instances where new staff were assigned to pick up work that had already been started by others, etc., which is frustrating on the part of the force and inefficient on the part of ourselves. We're trying very hard to avoid that now. So we've had very direct conversations between Julie, Sharon and Gillian and myself in terms of I need you to be able to try and get this information to us in this week, because this is when I have the staff booked. If we can't finish it in that week, we're going to have to come back at some future point, which may be a good few weeks in advance, if we want the same staff to pick up that work again and avoid having this constant churn of different individuals coming in to try and be more reactive to when information comes through. I think it's better to actually have a little bit of a delay, but have the same staff looking at the material. So that's right now what we're trying to do. In terms of looking forward to, you know, the 2021 audit, I hear what you're saying about, you know, certain jobs might get prioritised across, you know, in favour of others. What we're actually trying to do is be realistic about how long an audit will take to complete based on what we've experienced over the past couple of years, but particularly in the remote working environment, and make sure that we book staff for long enough to enable the audit to fully close out, but taking on board an expectation of how quickly we expect the client to be able to provide the information and respond to queries, etc. Because I think our expectation was that things could move a lot quicker than they have been able to.
Understood.
Okay. Jim, you've got your hand up. You're still muted, Jim.
So I double clicked it, sorry. I think we're all very keen to get these old audits out of the way, because there's always a risk of new issues arising which will exacerbate the problems we've got. So I just want to ask two questions, one in relation to each year. In relation to 18-19, I think you're saying the outstanding issue now is predominantly to do with procurement. Can I just tease out who's waiting for what and how quickly will that be done for 18-19 in relation to the procurement?
So I have, obviously, as the same as you have, I've now seen the internal audit report that was prepared on that particular issue. And I have a number of questions as a result of that report, really trying to get into the detail of the other work that's been done alongside it, which is referenced in the report but isn't really detailed. And effectively the thought process and the decisions and actions that have been taken as a result of those pieces of work. So that those questions are with Sharon and the DCC for them to respond to on that. Separately, I just, for the absolute clarity for everyone in the meeting, once that issue is resolved, the disclosures within that set of financial statements for 18-19, and particularly the going concern considerations, will need to be revisited and updated, because the obligation when you sign a set of accounts is that you have understood the going concern position for 12 months from that date, not from the dates when, you know, you last picked them up or the balance sheet or whatever.
Okay, that's fine. So could I ask Julie, how quickly do we think we can respond on that procurement, those procurement questions, and address the going concern question as well?
I think it's probably Sharon, is it?
Or Sharon?
In terms of the questions, a number of the questions are down to the DCC, because it's, we'll talk about this in more detail later, and it's probably more appropriate there. So if you don't mind, we could leave that till later.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy for the details. But I do think it's important that we actually set ourselves a goal and really prioritise this. And if I can move on to the 1920, I think, if I remember correctly, the main issue was valuations then. Are there any problems being identified in the valuations, or are the values actually coming to an agreement now? It's merely a matter of getting it signed off by the relevant people before we can address the valuations for 1920.
So we've now had feedback from our real estate specialists that have looked at a sample of the asset valuations in detail. And there are a couple of assets whereby, in our specialists' view, the values that have been used by Align, which are your new valuer this year, are outside of what we would consider to be an acceptable range. I've talked these through with Sharon and Julie, and they predominantly impact assets which are somewhat unique in nature. So, for example, the dog school we talked about, and that's the only dog school that you have, and the former Skegness Magistrates Court, which was recently purchased. It's a relatively unique asset in terms of its characteristics, where it's located, etc. So there are some issues arising which I need to work through, and you know, that will be detailed when we provide to you our audit results report. At this point, I'm not anticipating that they will require a change to the financial statements, but they do require us to make some other additional inquiries in terms of the other assets within the base, and make sure that we cover off some queries, particularly in regards to some of the inputs to the calculations, floor areas and the like, which we haven't yet got responses back on all of our questions asked. But it's certainly moving forward.
Right, I'm pleased it's moving forward. I suppose the only question is it moving fast enough, but perhaps leave that to others to answer.
Douglas, you had
Yes, really just following up from Jim's point, and I wondered how realistic it was to put target dates to resolve these issues, because I think our worry is that you know, they tend to drift, and they have been drifting clearly. For both of those issues, is it possible to set a target date to to help focus the mind?
Well, is that question to me? Sorry, or
well, to both, because as I see it, Helen, I think 1920 is probably the ball's in your court, and 1819 it's with Sharon. So it's to both of you, really.
Yeah, and I think this goes back slightly to the point I was making earlier, in the sense that, so for example, over the last 2 weeks, I've had staff booked to Lincolnshire Police, and we've progressed these matters quite significantly. But questions and further requests for information have had to come out of that process, which are now back with the finance team. And we're not talking about a lot of questions, there's just some. And we need to coordinate when they are able to deliver me a response so that I can then schedule staff. The difficulty I have is I can't just turn information around, you know, send me a question and I'll deal with it within a week. I just simply don't have the resource availability to enable that to happen. So we need to manage it in a planned way, so that the force and the finance team know when they're able to respond to me, and I have somebody able to action that response when it comes my way. And I think that was the point I was trying to make. That's what I'm trying to work quite carefully with Sharon and Julie to achieve, so that we get that managed response, as opposed to everybody trying to do things on the fly or with their other hand, if that makes sense.
Yes, I mean, I think I understand that. It's just, if you get that plan together, can we then have a target date to actually complete the work?
Yes, absolutely, but it does depend on when I get answers back to the questions that I've asked. So that doesn't raise another question, is all I would caveat that with.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Tracy.
Sorry, I'm asking the same question again, but I just don't feel that's been answered. Is it 2 weeks? Is it 4 weeks? Is it 6 weeks? Is it 8 weeks? What's the likely time frame for each of those accounts being signed off? I don't need it to be exact, but it just feels like it's going on and on and on, and I've got no idea when it's going to be done. Thank you, Julie.
Julie?
I mean, just you know, we have had these discussions, because, you know, all of us, Gillian, Sharon, Helen and I, you know, we want to get this done. And the last discussion that we had is that we were aiming for the end of May to get it all done and dusted. Since that time, you know, further information has come to light, which we'll be discussing later on in the agenda. You know, and so we need to get some clarity on that, some of those points about the timescales for that, because you know that's a new development, if you like. So, in a sense, we're all in the same place on this. We all want to set targets. We did set a target for the end of May. I mean, the last time the four of us all you know, we all sort of, you know, said, yep, we're aiming for that, didn't we? And you know, with a fair wind, we might still get there. But we'll perhaps be clearer on that later on in the agenda, probably.
Okay, thank you. Anything else then on that item? No. So we're struggling around now to find items that wouldn't directly or have a minimal impact on Jason. Could I suggest the internal audit strategy and plan item rather than the current stuff? So I wonder if you could pick up item 6.
Yeah, that's no problem at all. So obviously put together the outline plan for next year and the strategy for the next three years as a total 2 year. Hopefully this is a better format than you might have previously seen from us in terms of how we've laid it out. The kind of first section just provides some information in terms of how we've considered and put this plan together. It's been through quite a kind of lengthy process back and forth with senior management input on the force and OPC side, and obviously a number of detailed discussions around the risk registers that factor into that process as well. And then hopefully, per the plan that's provided to yourself, that kind of really fleshes out in terms of what's presented to yourself. There's obviously a number of cyclical audits that have kind of come back round that you might have seen previously, but again, potentially around some of the upcoming risks in that area. Got procurement on there and contract management, and then obviously related to some significant changes that are going to happen around the future services program as well. So I wasn't going to go into any further detail, particular Chair. Just happy to kind of take questions on that item.
Okay, perhaps could I kick off really on what you've just mentioned, future services program. Have you any idea yet of the potential scope of that work? And given its significance, do you think 10 days is going to be enough?
In terms of that one, per the kind of comments a bit further down in terms of the scope to that is still to be decided and agreed with management, and you're right in terms of it's going to need to perhaps be some flexibility in terms of that piece of work. Obviously the plan includes a number of contingency days, and again we're happy to kind of regularly kind of have a flexible approach and feedback to the committee and say, right, well actually we've decided per the current situation and changing risks we need to move some days around, so it is kind of happy to be flexible approach.
Okay, Jim, you've got your hand up. And you're muted again, Jim.
Following up on that procurement, I think timeliness is a key consideration there, and I'm not sure what the best time is, but obviously because this is a time limited exercise in terms of the end of the G4S contract, I think it's important that the audit import comes at the relevant stages when it can be as most benefit. So I think an early discussion and agreement about timing I think would be very helpful on that. So that's the first comment. Don't know if you want to respond to that or just acknowledge it, but
no, I think you're right, Jim. As soon as this plan's agreed, we'll sit down with Gillian, Julie, and Sharon and work out appropriate timescales and when that fits best. Okay. The second one I want to pick up on is partnerships. Have you got a proposed partnership you intend to use as a template for evaluating the partnerships project, or is that still to be decided? So in terms of the partnerships one, that's one that's deferred from this year's plan. We had to kind of originally put a scope in place around that, looking at kind of the control mechanisms in place to manage partnerships. That's generally how that scope works. But as that's been deferred into next year, the scope will be revisited again when we pick that one back up.
Okay, this is an observation. It's something I briefly did talk with Jason about in a previous meeting, and that is the importance, I think, of the local resilience forum has really been emphasised with COVID. You know, it was crucial that that was up and running and working at the beginning of the epidemic, and it seems to have achieved that objective. But I'm not sure how the local resilience forum is evaluated, what arrangements there are for looking back and saying, well, what the lessons we've learned, you know, and how we can improve, and whether there's any independent review mechanism on the LRF. And I don't know if you know the answer, but I think consideration of the LRF in that partnerships report would actually be quite useful.
Okay, Jason, you've got your hand up, and you are there.
So just if by magic, and we're talking about the local resilience forum, which I chair, so that's just perfect timing, isn't it? So Jim, in terms of the evaluation, we've done a 10,000 volts debrief, national debrief, which has been done. Very happy to share that report with colleagues. In terms of holding us to account, the LRF has actually got no statutory footings, if I'm honest. Whilst it's got a duty as a partnership to come together in line with the Civil Contingencies Act, there's no duty in terms of its legal status. I think it is fair to say that the way the LRF has been utilised during the COVID and continues to be, because it's still live, and a meeting tomorrow is the SCG again, which is weekly at the moment, has been very unique. And there is a national review that's taking place through the integrated review about the purpose of LRFs. And obviously that is a call of evidence in terms of what we've been doing and not doing. So who holds us to account? Well, ultimately, it's the partnership itself. The chief executives and our leaders hold us to account. Is there a formal review? Yes, there is. It's the integrated review. That's been a national piece of work in terms of the role of LRFs in the future. And in terms of learning, there is a significant report, which again, I'm very happy to share with you, of the learning we've done and the actions that we're taking forward as a LRF as well.
Okay. Right. Have we concluded on that item? I think, Mark, you just wanted formal approval to the charter again, which on the basis that no one's raised anything negative about it, I take it we all approve the audit charter. Okay. For Jason's benefit, we've been through quite a few agenda items that probably have minimal impact on you, Jason. So we're now going to be going back and working through the agenda on the items we've still to cover where we think you have a particularly significant role. And the first one of those was going back to agenda item 4, which would be the action log from previous minutes of the meeting. So agenda item 4. Have we got any questions or queries on the action log from previous minutes? Quite a few of those have been concluded since the last meeting. Julie, do you want to kick off then?
I was going to propose that we close action 293 because effectively the work around the scheme of governance is being picked up now by the Future Services Programme, because, you know, most of what that was about was around the strategic partnership and so on. So I just wonder, you know, in that guise, really, it's been superseded by the Future Services Programme. So whether we should close that, and as part of your consideration of aspects of the Future Services Programme, the scheme of governance would come up in that.
I personally agree with that. There was also some very specific issues that were put the governance working group's way. Some have been dealt with, and we'll probably hear that others, or at least one outstanding one, is about to be dealt with. So from my perspective, I was wondering where we were going with that, and I would concur with yourself that I think it's been overtaken by events. I mean, Jim, you were on that group as well. Are you content with that?
Yes, I think it was set up by a previous Chief Constable with the current Commissioner, and after the elections, the the Commissioner and the Chief Constable could decide if they wanted to resurrect that group. I mean, I think the old one it's faded, all the work we've actually done. So if they felt there was need for a working group, they could re-establish it in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Douglas.
Yes, just on 245, the first one, could we get a target date for completion? It was raised at the previous meeting that progress was slow, and it seems to be ongoing. When is that likely to be concluded?
I think last time I had suggested that maybe it was time to close it, but I think Jason had suggested that it needed to stay there for a while because of the work the new Chief Constable was instigating.
So, David, it's not like me to say, can we not close an action? Because I like to close as many actions as we possibly can. The reality was, in terms of giving the assurance of where it connects to the revised strategy and our new corporate governance arrangements with the selection of the new Chief Constable, this obviously work links into our new performance framework. So I'm very happy for that to be the update. And again, very happy because we'll give you updates with the reassurance and the assurance map work that we've done anyway, which is always a standing item. Agenda item anyway, so I think we can close it, but that was just the reason the last meeting was going to be connected to the new structures.
Okay. Perhaps one from me, the very last item on the table, 359, talking about something I think is vitally important. Certainly, we're very interested as a JIAC, is the risk register for the Future Services Programme. It just indicates it will be circulated shortly. I wonder if there's any update on when that might be. I presume such a thing must exist.
Yeah, so David, we've had the Future Services Transformation Programme board this morning, obviously chaired by the Chief. It was agreed, obviously, that would allow, as I expected, that we'd have it. The slight delay, not that there's not one, there is one, but we're combining the Horizons Transformation Programme with our Future Services Programme as well. So, as you can imagine, that needs to make sure the risk register is as one, not individual. So the team have got that work. It should be done in the next couple of weeks to combine it into the one risk register. And again, we're very happy once that's done, we can forward it on to yourselves. And again, I know we've had a conversation with the board. It'd be really useful to get an opportunity to talk you a lot more about that programme. Not so much for today, but I think there's some opportunity coming in May where there's a day's workshop with yourselves where we could talk that through what's happening with it as well.
I think myself and colleagues would very much welcome a briefing on the Future Services Programme. I think that would be really helpful. Do we agree with that? I'm sure we
absolutely.
Do. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So that's good. Another item that again, Jason, you've mentioned is 344, which is to do with counter fraud audit. I know there's an update in a later report, but it talks about oral update by the DCC RPO, which I guess is Aubrey, available at this meeting. Am I to read that the text will come to in recommendation 4.3 in relation to the internal audit reports update log? Are we to take that as the update, or is there something else?
No, that'd be a fair point, and that would be the update.
Okay, we'll perhaps pick any issues up with that when we get there. Anything else then on this action plan? Okay. Can we then move on to agenda item 5 and potentially agenda item 16 as well, which is simply a specific audit report, which we can have some initial discussion of, certainly an introduction potentially from Mark on that. So if Mark, if you could pick up 5 and 16.
Yep, absolutely. So progress report, to give you the update on where we're at in terms of progress against the internal audit plan for 2021. Pleased to kind of be able to present so many final reports in here that kind of shows the progress that's been able to be done. So we've got 7 final reports for Lincolnshire specifically. Before we even get to it, yes, I was so excited to be able to tell you that we've done the 1920 business continuity final report. I forgot to put it on the bottom of the appendix. So in terms of that, just while we're on addressing it, would you like to circulate that as soon as we can after this meeting, so that we don't have any further delays in terms of that one.
Okay, that's fine.
So I'll do that. So seven final reports. We've got 2 out in draft in respect of workforce planning and governance, just waiting for management comments back to be able to finalise those. So that leaves in total a further four audits that were down for 2021. Partnerships we've already discussed in terms of we had lined up to do it, but we've deferred that into next year, and obviously that was approved by yourself as chair of the JIAC. The commissioning follow-up audit, again, we had planned to do it in around early April, but due to staff leave, we've just pushed that back into the start of May. And again, that kind of work, the work started to be done to finish that one off as well. The 2 IT audits is probably where it's been a bit of there's been a few changeover of staff, I believe, in terms of the IT side, which has taken a while to identify the right individuals who would be our key contacts for the audit. But through discussion with Gail in the commercial partnership team, scopes have been sent across for that, so we are hoping those will be progressed fairly quickly as well. So that's the update on Lincolnshire specific audits. Also very pleased, while we're on the subject of collaboration, to say that the collaboration audits for 2021 have been completed and the draft reports have been issued. One report doesn't have any recommendations, so that's a very positive start, and that one will be progressed through to final very quickly. The other one, workforce plan, has a couple of recommendations. So again, just working with the lead CFO for that, which is Simon Alsop in Derbyshire, to get the relevant management responses for those. So I think in terms of timing for your next committee, it works quite well, because the next joint CFO meeting is in July, which is when those would be formally signed off by all the CFOs. So by September, you'll see those final reports. Just while we're talking about collaboration, in terms of planning for 21-22, again, we had quite a detailed and lengthy discussion with the joint CFOs around how we make this better and progress it going forward. It was agreed that we'd have a more detailed approach in terms of not just picking a thematic and then looking at including a sample of collaboration units, would be a bit more targeted. So in terms of the work done today, I've had meetings with Elaine Grocock, who's the collaboration manager. She's collated like all the risk registers for the collaboration units and their business plans. And on the back of that, I put together a proposed plan of audits, suite of audits for 21-22, which use that collaboration pot of time. I've sent that on to Julie. Julie's now the chair of the regional CFO meeting, for her to have a first review of it, and then it'll go out wider for further comments. But the whole point of the process is that by July, at that joint meeting, the plan will be agreed, and we'll be able to get going with those audits a lot earlier in the year. So hopefully you will see that come into fruition in terms of a quicker and speedier process in terms of the collaboration audits. I will probably just pause there. I mean, do you want to ask any specific questions on that, or would you like to just carry on with the rest of the report?
I would carry on, Mark, please.
Okay, so just one small on page 5. There's a colour error in terms of the recruitment follow-up audit. It is limited and should be amber rated instead of the green colour that's there. So apologies for that. So in terms of obviously there's the detailed summary reports in section A3. I think probably the one that will draw the attention is the split audit opinion on the payments and creditors audit. Now, hopefully I've explained it in terms of the text that's there, but there was some additional objectives added to that audit at the request of management. And because those specific issues were the ones that came up, we thought it only right to kind of make a clear distinction between the overall internal control system for payments and creditors and the specific elements around the contract expenditure. So that's the reasoning for that. But I'll kind of just take all the kind of reports in there as I've read and then just ask for specific questions.
Okay. And will you talk separately about the procurement report once we've done this one?
Yes, I'll maybe take that as a separate paper, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine. So any questions and queries on this group of audits here? Douglas, I think you've got your hand up.
Yes, so Mark, I just had one on the payroll audit. Am I right in saying that those payments were made without any supporting documentation? This is on page 14, sorry, the mileage receipts.
Yeah, so that's true. That's kind of, it was specific to the MSU way of the believe the supporting evidence will have been with MSU, but obviously they're paid through Lincolnshire, so there was a bit of a gap between what the MSU officers were doing and what's done in force. So that's why it was just how they would bridge that gap.
So there was evidence, but it wasn't available. It's just to me, it sounds quite a fundamental issue, and yet it's rated as a 3. Would there have been evidence when the payment was made and it wasn't available, or?
I believe it's a case of the paperwork sits with MSU and but it's not provided to Lincolnshire when they make the payment. I believe that's right, but if I'm incorrect in that, I'm happy to update.
I just wonder whether that should just be followed up and just confirmed what the process is, because it certainly sounds like a bit of a weakness there.
Yeah, happy to take an action away, Douglas, and maybe just provide you with an email that clarifies for you, if that's okay.
Right, fine, thank you.
Jim, it's your turn.
Thank you. On page 12, the income and debtors, a lot of the narrative about the audit objectives actually doesn't seem that relevant. So I'm assuming there's some sort of typing problem. And also the recommendation too, it's classed as a housekeeping, but I think it's not. So I was just slightly confused by it, but
yeah.
I think, sorry, yes, let you respond.
Yeah, apologies, Jim. I think when obviously putting the objectives into each, obviously there's the suite of core financials, and apologies, it looks like the objectives don't quite align to the correct audit, so apologies for that oversight.
I think that's true for payroll as well.
Yeah, I think it runs across a few, so again, apologies for that. And yes, the recommendation written on page 12 is the one priority 2 that's referred to at the top. It's just got the housekeeping in brackets is incorrect, so apologies for that.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask about the extent we perhaps can cover this in this part of the meeting, the additional work done on payments and creditors, which seem to relate to exceptional purchases? Presumably, management had some concerns that proper process wasn't being followed in that regard. I don't know if management want to comment, or if you can comment, Mark, what the origin of that work was.
Do you want to take that, Sharon, or?
Yes, as we said, we asked for a review of EPAs because we were concerned that these were not being, authorised in a timely manner, and the work did display that, as the list of 6 shows. We have taken action in relation to these. We have looked into which contracts these are and where they originated, and I have had a discussion with the Chief Officer Group this week in relation to them, and we've emphasised the importance to us as a team and as an organisation that the proper procedures followed. So the action that's been identified has already been discharged.
Were you, or those involved, happy with, how shall I say, without going into the detail, the legitimacy of these purchases, albeit not through proper process?
It was more a question of timing. These are all instances where there was an urgent need to put an arrangement in place. Now, we all recognise that happens sometimes, but we should still follow proper process. So there was no doubt about the actual nature of the contract or the service.
Have we lost Sharon now?
I think we have. Yes, Sharon, you've gone quiet.
So this is where Julie takes back over now, because she returns a favour from Sharon. Come on, let's see how good you guys are.
Or should we pick it up when we get to the item, the private part?
Yes, good idea. Yeah.
Excellent idea.
Okay, pick it up again later. Ian, you had your hand up anyway.
No, it's fine. If we're gonna pick up from there again, there's a bit about a few broader questions. I'll pick it up then.
Okay. Can I also pick?
Was Sharon just faking it? She just stop because she was going to get just freeze and just pretend they can't hear me. That's right.
I didn't realise I had stopped, to be honest. I carried on talking. Did none of you hear me?
It was the best explanation ever, Sharon. I'm really sorry I didn't catch it.
That's how we've changed with virtual meetings now. Before you used to get a call on the mobile, didn't you? Or someone knocked on the door when you're in a meeting. Now you just freeze and make out you've lost contact.
You change your name to connecting ... Yeah, we know the routines now. It's fine.
Could I ask a couple of questions then on the recruitment follow-up audit? Obviously, there's a fundamental recommendation there relating to temporary contracts being made permanent and suggested ways in which the service or the system can be improved. The response is simply agreed. So I don't know if we could have a bit more information in what way, what specific action is being taken going forward to make sure that this doesn't happen in future. Because agreed is great, but how are you going to deliver that going forward? Can anyone pick that? I don't know if it's Sharon again, is it? No.
Sharon, do you want to start?
Again, I think the specifics of this might be best taken later on in the private session, but in general, we have undertaken a review of processes and we are satisfied that we do have a sound process in place. Okay,
right. And my other question in this one relates to potential resolution of the ongoing ex gratia payment, as to whether this has finally been resolved or is about to be finally resolved. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Julie, at this point.
It's well underway, almost there. I've actually delegated the authority to review and approve, consider this payment to the Chief Executive. Yeah. And he's not been in the office thus far, but he hopes to be in next week.
But is it fair to say you've had transparency now about all the supporting documentation?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so hopefully that one will be resolved. Ian, have you got your hand up again? You muted or?
Sorry, I'm just skipping through. Yeah, it is obviously my ambition that I can get to my last meeting and actually have the ex gratia and the 18-19 accounts signed by that point in time, and I'll deem my tenure here to have been successful. But just on the recruitment follow-up, and I appreciate the elements we pick up in the private session, I think I'm just looking to make sure, because apologies, I need to leave at 4, so I may not be here for some of this stuff. There's no way that HR can easily see extensions to the temporary contracts. I suppose my concern with that is, does the new process actually transfer the control to HR for temporary contracts, which is where I'd expect it to be sat in the first place, as opposed to they can't actually see the temporary extensions, in which case, how can people, it just seems like the whole thing was outside of HR. And that is, if that's being answered in the private section, that's fine.
So David, do you want me to come on that?
Yes.
So firstly, HR, and this is my frustration, Ian, HR have to be involved in it because they do the contract. So the fact is, they're saying the issue is the monitoring of it. That's the issue, which again, as Sharon's touched on, we'll touch a little bit on it. That's been tightened from the review. And importantly, going forward, it links into and again, without talking out of turn of some of our colleagues, it goes forward into part of the future services transformation program, where actually the system will be tighter because actually we own the information better than we do.
Thank you.
Jim, you've got your hand up again, I think.
Yes, it was just going back to the issue of the ex gratia payment, and I'm pleased that that particular issue is on the way to being resolved. One aspect of it, though, which I'm not sure how we're going to address, is that there was debate about whether a certain thing was an ex gratia payment or a legal settlement. And they had different limits under the financial regulations, which exacerbated the problem. And so it was just an observation, perhaps a question. Does someone need to look at the regulations and see whether we need to do any clarification there to avoid ambiguities in the future?
I think there's complete clarity about that. I mean, Sharon and I certainly are completely clear about it.
Okay.
So I think there was just it was a complete it was just inadvertent what happened rather than it being lack of clarity.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So if we have no further questions on those reports, Mark, do you want to talk a bit about the procurement review, a special piece of work?
Yep, so the report on procurement as presented to yourselves today, this was obviously an additional piece of work requested kind of jointly by Julie and Sharon. The objectives of the review were to kind of look at in detail one particular procurement process, and hopefully that's clearly what's been presented to yourselves. In terms of timing, just to give a outline, the piece of work was completed to a draft report stage in about November, October time, and that was when it was first shared with Julie and Sharon, and obviously DCC Harwin. And then between that point and the final iteration, some further work was requested, and that's what is referred to in this report as well. The recommendations that are related to this particular report were kind of wider control recommendations in terms of future learning and output that came through our review in this one particular instance. I don't think there's anything further I wanted to say at this stage, but yeah, happy to either take questions now or later.
Are people content for us to leave that report at that point and come back to it in the private session? Would that be a sensible thing? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
We shall do that there then. Okay, can we move on then to agenda item 7, internal audit report implementation progress reports. Have we got any colleagues got any questions or queries on that? Those items. Again, I think there's been quite a lot of progress. Yeah, this is where, referring back to the point I raised earlier about counter fraud. So this is on page 5. There is a series of bullet points there on page 5 outlining the actions taken following a meeting on the 7th of April to move this thing forward. I know the revised timescale still remains end of the current calendar year, which I think it's been outstanding for a while, but at least we seem to be making some progress. Does anyone want to comment on those particular points?
Aubrey, do you want to say something, because you've been leading the work with before?
Yeah, Aubrey.
Yeah, absolutely. We held a meeting on the 7th, which was outside the normal schedule of the Anti-Fraud and Corruption Steering Group, specifically to look at the issue of training and awareness. Mm-hmm. And it was a successful meeting where we agreed the key points that are listed there in terms of way forward. In terms of specific scheduling of completion dates for each of those items, once the people that attended the group have seen the minutes, which I've yet to circulate, then they would come back to the next scheduled meeting, which is in June, for those dates to be ratified. So I'm content that we've got a clear way forward in terms of the 3 key areas, which were induction training, refresher training, and role-specific training that's required.
Okay, thank you. Tracy, you've got your hand up. Tracy, you're muted, I'm afraid.
Had to do it sometime. I said I had 2 questions, but Aubrey just answered one of them, so that's okay. I just wondered, under commissioning, the very last item, no, it's not the last item, it's commissioning November 2020, the decision note policy. I wondered if there was any update from the SMT meeting in April 2021, recommendations to be made to OPCC? No, because it was supposed to be delivered by the end of April. Might be completed now, might be one you could tick off. No, everyone's lost. We'll wait till next time. Don't worry.
Okay. Douglas, you've got your hand up?
Yes, just a very quick one. Could we just ensure that the recruitment follow-up temporary contracts is added to the bottom of the appendix, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do that. So any other issues? You still got your hand up, Douglas, but I presume that's, yeah, there's not another question. Okay. Okay, so we can consider that item dealt with. Next item then is the relatively routine item, agenda item 8, review of compliance with governance arrangements. We have the usual table disclosing all such arrangements that have taken place since the last meeting. Has anyone got any questions or comments on those? Okay, shall I take that as noted then for agenda item 8? Agenda item 9 is review of both organisations' codes of corporate governance. And I note from the covering report that they haven't changed. Did you want to say, since our last review, do you want to say anything about these, Aubrey? I think you'd coordinated this.
No, thank you, Chair. There's nothing in particular I wanted to add to the report.
Okay. Anyone got any comments, given that they haven't changed? Douglas?
Yes, just interested, Aubrey, on page 9, where it talks about the arrangements for the review of governance under 3.11. It talks about the PCC and CC carrying out a wide-ranging self-assessment. I just wondered what form that took.
Certainly from the OPCC side of view, then I would review the document itself for any changes in legislation or guidance that's available, and that's also ratified with the Chief Executive of the OPCC. So that's our side of the way in which we look at the document in which it's reviewed. There is also, we do also have an annotated version which links to sources of evidence to demonstrate how we comply with the code, and that's also reviewed.
Right, so that's basically an annual event, is it?
It is, yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So no further comments then. We'll move on to the next item, which we haven't yet discussed, which would be agenda item 13. What I propose, therefore, is, given that this would be the last public item, is we consider this matter, then have a 5-minute break and come back, and we'll then be in the closed session. I think that would work quite well. So agenda item 13, which is the latest version of the dashboard aspects, at least, of the assurance map. Again, Aubrey, did you want to say anything by way of introduction?
I'd just highlight paragraph 4 in the covering report, which was something that was requested in terms of the actions and activities that we were going to concentrate on in developing the map before the September JIAC meeting, where it was agreed that JIAC would again review progress. So they were the areas that we'd agreed. And also, obviously, the actions falling out of the joint assurance map development meeting that was held.
Okay.
Other than that, I've got no other comments. Happy to take questions.
Okay, Tracy, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question on point 2.8 on your update on progress with the map development, talking about no updates being made to the original content by the force leads. I just wondered whether or not they were properly engaged, and it's just a concern that there's been no update. And is there a plan to kind of build usage, because it's an excellent tool, but only if it's used?
I think that's the one of the key challenges at the moment is embedding this within the leadership, within the senior leaders and the leads for each of the functions. I think it's fair to say there's been a slow start in terms of uptake and updating of some of them. I have to say, however, that I have received some updates after the time of creation of this report. So we do have a slightly more, shall we say, I have a fuller draw than I did at the time when this report was prepared for JIAC.
Good, thank you.
Okay, Jason, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I do. So firstly, we've seen some changes, continue to see changes from our senior leaders at the moment as well. So some of this is about that induction and regular understanding where it fits, and again making sure they're on the same page, because it's not just about an individual, it's not a collective as a management team. It fits into, and again I'll update very later on in terms of some of the other actions, but in terms of governance, this will report into the new performance framework. So it will be a case of, if they don't update it, then they'll be held to account while they're updating it. And again, the bit around it for me, Tracy, and again I think I've mentioned this before, is I see where it can add value to the organisation to get that overview and assurance about what's working and what's not. And as you can see, you'll see it later on in the force updates. There's some commonality in some of the issues that's being raised, which is the perfect bit for me from a force overview and oversight. That's the bit we need to pick up on, and what's working really well, and we're really pleased how that's going around governance and assurance, but also the bits of where clearly there's an issue that's impacting on delivery, which again I think you'll see that in the updates later on.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's, Jason, that's really helpful. I mean, we're talking about, there's an element there of stick in terms of the performance management element. I think that the other bit, as we both know, is that actually it's the carrot piece as well, about the so what, how can this help? And I'm completely echo Tracy's point. This is a great tool if used, and therefore we have to draw the connection between what this is trying to do, decision making, issues, prevention, whatever it is. And it makes it easier for people to kind of buy into it. And as you say, if you can see where we're getting values from this, and it's not necessarily just a case of it's a tick box to compliance, there's actually the value added stuff as well. Drawing those lessons, those stories is going to be really important. So yeah, stick is always a great way to kind of introduce it, but actually it's the carrot that keeps it going.
Yes, and Ian, the carrot's longer than the stick at the minute. But if the stick needs to grow longer than the carrot, then it will do. So the important bit here is about the investment in our staff. So this is one important part. But again, for a number of good reasons, we've not invested as much in some of our seniors as we should have done, and about what is their roles and responsibility, and ultimately making sure they've got the assurance of what they're doing is delivering against what we ultimately want to do in terms of strategy, safest county, etc. Is that part ultimately. So again, without going into the detail now, I'm very happy to give you a very quick update in the next section, but the governance of the force is changing. So it is all about that empowerment. It is about that bit of, we want you to go out there and do your job, but the bit around is, but we also want you to flag, and we want to have the assurance that if there is something not working, then ultimately we can do something about it. The next section you'll see, there's been a theme and there has been action, which therefore those that's doing the work, having the conversations, can see by doing that, that's resulted in B, and therefore from B, we're starting to see difference in C. Which again, I'll go a bit more detail later.
That's great, Jason. Thank you. I think that matched accountability is the key thing for me, and anything to do with this. That decision making, the emphasis, the empowerment, all those words you want to use from the bingo phrase, they're absolutely spot on. It's about giving them their head in a controlled risk environment, and that's fantastic.
So Jason, if I could just ask then, where it mentions in terms of the note of the meeting, the JAR meeting on the 16th, that you will be providing us as JIAC with some information, is that something you want to pick up in the closed section of this meeting?
Yeah, so I think the bit around it, David, is how does it all fit together, isn't it? Okay. That's the key bit. It can't be in isolation. So again, part of the governance changes that we're doing is as a result of the new strategy and delivery plans. Again, that'll show you how it connects.
Okay, we can pick that up under the assurance map bit in the private section. Have anyone got any other questions? Because if not, can I suggest we adjourn for 5 minutes and then come back? And when we come back, we'll be in private session. If that's okay?